you. Good morning, everyone. What I'm feeling right now, or what I plan to feel right now, and is coming back, is a deep sense of gratitude and appreciation for being here. Thank you to Dora and other folks who worked really hard for half a decade to make this happen. And just, it's a little overwhelming. I'll try not to dwell on it too much because I have to get through a whole talk. But to be here among people I haven't seen in years, but who have known it for years, and people I've known for, 24 hours in some cases, and just the string of things that eventually had to go right for all this to happen. So I'm deeply appreciative. I'm giving you a little time to absorb what's on there. A lot of robots. This is a talk about robots. Dora said, you must talk about robots. I don't know anything about robots, so this is my attempt to talk about robots. That's not true. But I did think at one point Dora liked me as a person, and then she put a comedian up front before me, so I will look even more boring and depressive than usual. And of course, one of the greatest living scientists in the world will follow me, so I'll also look pretty unaccomplished. So I have to make up for it with tricks. So I'm going to try to trick you today. This is a talk about me finding out I suddenly have a presenter clicker. It's really about stories today. And I don't know if you'll like the stories that I've been thinking about. We'll find out. I do want to end with some hope. But I'll tell you now that I think the old-fashioned hope is not enough, where we close our eyes and hold our breath, cross our fingers, click our heels, and believe it'll all be okay. I do think that one of the great gifts in psychology has been the work of folks who, in some cases we've celebrated the life of already, and some we celebrated the life of in the past, like Rick Snyder, Shane Lopez, hard to talk about. Their hope we need. We need pathways and agency and something else, I think. So I want to bring us to this something else by the end of our talk. This is what you'll get. The 5 great ages of work. I don't know if they're true, but I hand drew them, so there's something. What are we working for? My talk is meaning in life and work. We're here for work. I'm working now. Why? What are we doing here? Meaning is a bridge to a less terrible world. I don't know if it's a bridge to a good world yet, but it's a bridge to a less terrible world. Some of the themes that are shared across meaning and in life and work, and then more robots. So there it is. My hope here is that we at least take a moment to figure out how we got here and whether we're prepared for what comes next. As a field, as people, I don't want to talk too much about myself, but I will take everything I say as if that sounds like criticism is leveled at me. Everything that sounds like optimism is leveled at you. So when I do talk about myself, it'll be about the failings here. But I think in the distant past, we had a form of work that was one way. And we worked for food. We worked for family survival, maybe tribal unit survival. And meaning may have come from just being a part of that group, recognizing the passing of seasons in a regular way, watching the sun go down, or not, I don't know. Sometimes you need that, sometimes you don't. Maybe our offspring. Well, I'm going to fast forward to the age of emperors and queens. And we worked for food and family survival and this sense of glory that might outlive us. We worked on behalf of rulers who claimed divinity or just had massive power. Our kingdom was better than your kingdom. My Assyria can take over your Babylon. My Persia can take over your Assyria. Alexander the Greek will get you all eventually, right? Alexander the Great, I'm sorry. I know he's Macedonian. Then we move on to the great Industrial Revolution, right? How wonderful. Where I believe suddenly we were compartmentalized in a very different way than we used to be. The nature of work became less about who we are and what we can produce in terms of value for someone else. We work for food and family survival and pollution. That was one of our benefits. We still get to live with the pollution of that era and think about what that means for who's going to live with what we do. So we got meaning from survival, maybe our class, and trying to think about where we are in the ladder or the pyramid of life, who's on that same rung with us, who's getting away with stuff we don't like. And I feel like we talk a little bit more about the afterlife in these eras of the last few thousand years, few hundred years. My pitch to you today is that this is the modern era, and that one of the processes that started to happen was a sharing, move to a stacking, move to a separating, move to us at the end, the bottom of an inverted pyramid where everything is on our shoulders now. We work for food and our offspring, and maybe for the afterlife, and maybe for glory of some sort, and a whole list of other things. And maybe I would say that in each of these great ages so far, we are prepared right now to understand where meaning might have come from, where well-being might have come from, where happiness might have come from, how flow might emerge, how connections might have emerged. And we can understand where these things play a role. I'll focus on meaning because I know a little bit about that. But where would these meanings have come from? I think we could grasp that. There's something intuitive about that. This is very well drawn. Thank you very much for appreciating it. But what if the future isn't something we recognize? What if the future isn't something where three good things, a meaning activity, a little mindfulness to start our day, even dancing and humor, which, I can do without dancing, but I cannot do without humor. What if that's not enough right now? I don't know. Series of questions. So we think about the future, and people have been telling us stories about the future. We ignore scientists for some reason, right? I mean, are any of you mystified that the sun doesn't set this time of year in Iceland? And think it's because dragons or butterflies are eating the sun? No, you're like, this makes sense to me. I don't necessarily love it, but it makes sense. I can deal with this. I remember taking my first class on the greenhouse effect in 1989. We've known longer than that, more than my entire lifetime, that we're creating problems that will be very, very difficult to stop if we don't do something about it. That's just one of the problems. That's the one I perseverate on the most. But I think about the Matrix. It's a future full of robots, and they treat us as food the way we seem to treat all the rest of life. That we get to consume. The robots get to consume directly from our brains the activity of our living, of our dreams, of our imagination. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that's the better outcome, because maybe this is another outcome we need to worry about. Mad Max. Fury Road, the original Mad Max, gasoline was the power. In this Mad Max, water is the basis for power and might. And what if this is what's coming next? I don't know which you'd choose. A dusty hellscape full of bullets and motorcycles? Or being plugged in and dreaming our lives away contentedly in a pretend world where nothing's wrong? I mean, at least there's no robots in Mad Max and less screen time. We know how bad that is. So when I'm thinking about meaning in life and meaningful work, it's very funny, because I oftentimes think about, well, I want other people to have meaning in their lives. I want me to have meaning in my life. I want my life to be about trying to figure out how we can work so that no one has to feel plundered and cannibalized as they go into the world. So I want your work to feel meaningful. You're here working, many of you. Some of you were dragged along by somebody. So our lives today, our work, what is going on with that? The theme of this conference is like striking to me. It's one of those that we can walk past and be like, oh, that's really nice. Or it's one that we can ask, What am I doing about this? What world am I creating? And my concern is what we're doing is sprinting forward and looking backwards. Right? We know what worked in the past. But what do we even think about the future is terrifying. I mean, unless you're highly neurotic like me, maybe you don't even think about the future because you know you don't want to live with that all the time. I can't help it. I can't really turn it off, so I don't know. I'm neither sprinting nor looking anywhere. I'm just like standing. Oh my God. What is happening? Why are we going backwards so fast where I live in the United States? Why are we shipping so much backward thinking around the world, maybe? You might disagree that that's a different way of looking at things, but I think there's some fates that are coming, and we're looking at some things that are wonderful and beautiful, and maybe not right for the environment that is ahead. I don't know if they are or not. But when we run really fast, we publish, we create presentations, we do workshops, and we don't look for what might come next, we might run into something we are not anticipating. So my question for myself, us, if you're invited to consider it, are we ready to teach well-being in these futures? Some people are living in some version of these already. And by some, I mean maybe a sixth or a seventh of the planet. Are we ready to teach well-being when most of the planet, most people, are living under the thumb of robots or dust storms or horrific neighbors? And if not, are we able to help avoid these futures? What is meaning for? What is well-being for? So let's talk a little bit about meaningful work. The central suggestion of scholarship is that meaning and work and life are not so separate. They're almost like different blossomings from the same rootstock. Where I live in Colorado in the United States, there's the aspen trees. They share roots, sometimes for hundreds of square kilometers, and the trees emerge from the roots. One dies, from the same rootstock another emerges. So we can think about meaning in that way. If meaning dies in one area, we can find meaning in another place. We need to learn how to do that because life will challenge us. Life will take away gatherings like this because of COVID or what may come. So work is one way that we can create multiple paths to meaning, to build resilience, to build physical health, neurological health, biological health, familial health, community health, all these great things. Sometimes it's hard to balance these things. I typically talk about harmony, where things are happening at the same time. Work and life is happening at the same time. Many of you have your families here. I know some people that do. That's work and life happening at the same time. Many of you have been fortunate to work with your families over your careers. Some of you are traveling with some of your family. So they tend to happen at the same time. Usually we worry about this when we're living and work comes in and says, oh, you've got to revise, resubmit, or oh, you've got to negotiate a workshop. But they come in. And then we have to sort of figure out how it all fits together. And I want us to reflect on how you think, is this what's happening with the world and work? And at least in my country, the notion of retirement, the notion of paying for your kids' education, the notion of what could happen if you have an injury and then everything you planned for and precariously balanced goes away. So TGIF, right? Thank God it's Friday. This sense that we can kind of get through, maybe, but it doesn't always feel so great. And of course, in some ways, this is what we do. This is what we're here to remedy. The fact that the world is sort of, that we've co-created a weird little doomsday device that none of us want to feel the way it makes us feel, but we don't necessarily know how to fix the machinery, so we heal ourselves. We build ourselves stronger. We share in that experience so that we don't feel quite so isolated under that inverted pyramid. Of course, an inverted pyramid can feel painful because that's exactly what we use to inflict pain on ourselves during wartime sometimes. It hurts. It hurts to feel on the bottom of all of this. And I wonder, I'm a very individualistic person. I know this. I think about myself in relation to other people. It's really hard for me to imagine that communal approach. But, so I'm very guilty in this, but the emphasis of career advice so often is the same as the emphasis or the focus of performance reviews, hiring practices, the social safety network, increasingly, even in wonderful countries that do care about what happens to people in their society, political messaging, advertising, meaning making is me. My job, I gotta get this right. I gotta hold up. I have to keep going. And so for all underneath these inverted pyramids, I don't know, does that look stable to you? I mean, we can say like, come on, buddy, you can do it. Doesn't it feel sometimes inevitable that we can't keep it up and it's just gonna fall? So I started thinking about these pyramids, these pain points, the swords of Damocles held over our heads, right? And in that myth of the sword of Damocles, it was a sword that was held over the head of someone who wanted to be king for a day, right? The cost of taking on so much responsibility was your own death hovering above your head. It almost feels like a metaphor for life today. We have so much opportunity, but there's cost to that comes in the form of responsibility. And so I think about another inverted pyramid and what we might be able to build with that, right? In some sense, the only difference between the swords and a bridge is that they're connected, right? And these can last. Some of these are 1,000, 2,000 years old. I think that's kind of impressive that we can do that. In the town where I live, I tell this often, I don't know if anyone believes me, but it's true. The historic district of the town where I live in Fort Collins, United States, includes houses from the 1950s. The historic, if you want to like put different roof on your house, it has to go under historic review from the 1950s. So anything that is older than me, I think is like the realm of archaeologists. So I'm really impressed by old things, really impressed, almost to the fetishistic level. Like, ooh, this is a very old rock. So we can build things that work and last. And so maybe that's the metaphor I'm curious about right now. I just need to make sure I know what time it is. I can't see it on there. I still don't know. Okay. Okay, that's the 9:06. Okay, great. So let me just unpack what I'm trying to do with this model. This model says my work, their work, her work, his work, our work. The collective work that we do may be unavoidable in this sense of feeling crushed by responsibility, taking so much on. I have to be the CEO of my own company of one person. Right? I have to follow my passion. I have to find it first. I have to stay resilient in the face of people who don't give a crap about my passion. I have to figure out how to succeed. I have to figure out how to be authentic while I'm still making enough money to live on. All these sorts of things, right? It's difficult. But what if we link all of our efforts together? Right? That's what people are trying to do with the ultra-commercialized versions of purpose in the workplace, right? How can we link all of ourselves together so we can have safety, we can be vulnerable, we can put our heart and soul into our work and not feel misused, not feel cheated, not feel undermined, not fall prey to cynicism. We want to link together, right? So we have something to lean on because we can't hold it all up by ourselves. So the proposal is maybe meaningful work is a tool that we use to help prepare for and ideally prevent the worst of our potential futures. I don't know, maybe let's pause here. Is anyone worried about the future? Well, please keep your hand up for a second. Is anyone worried about the future? Does anyone want to look around the room? We're a room full of people who know how to do things well, have people to share our journey with us, understand happiness, well-being, meaning, flow, character strengths, and we're worried about the future. I don't know what the rest of the world feels. So you're not alone, right? So someone's next to you doing the best they can too. We'll lean on that person. You'll be leaned upon yourself. What are you worried about? For me, for whatever reason, it's always been the environment. I figure if we run out of that, then a lot of the stuff will feel a little bit too late already, right? I was just thinking about this, like in the first half of the 20th century on this continent, there's kind of a mess for decades. Wars, millions of deaths on several other continents as well by World War II. And we focused, of course, on rebuilding society, on trying to prevent fascism, at least in this continent. We didn't do so well in the other hemisphere, I suppose, right now. We wanted to reduce the possibility of war across borders, of aggression, and did pretty well, right? So it felt like we could absorb some horribleness among us because we could come back, we could learn from it, we could build institutions and relationships that would prevent it from happening in the future. If everything's on fire and underwater at the same time, that's going to be hard to do in my mind. So I perseverate on the environment. But what do you worry about? Shout it out. Environment? Is that what keeps you up at night? No, okay. Well, maybe it doesn't keep you up at night. But you care about the environment. What are other worries people have in the future? Political polarization. Social justice.
My kids.
Your kids. I'm worried about your kids too. More scared. No, I'm kidding. And you haven't met my kids yet. Oh. Well, there's plenty to worry about, I guess. And the hope is that, I guess, with what I'm doing with my career, is that if we do a good enough job at helping each other feel strong and resilient and non-defensive and non-aggressive, that we can come together, we can share moments like these, we can build something from this, we can link a bridge together that will support us, and the future will be all right. There's some reason to think about this. This is the hey, he's got some information now instead of just dumb stories. Will working on meaningful work bring about less polarization, a little bit healthier planet? Maybe, I don't know. Meaningful work does seem to be linked, as far as I can tell, to the greater good. At least some caring about it. So we help those who are near us. Helping others, for example, longitudinally increases meaningful work. Hopefully feels obvious, but gosh, it's nice to have data for obvious things. Isn't that always what we fought against in psychology and more recently positive psychology? Helping people and animals is related to higher meaningful work among veterinarians. Okay, they're probably going to help the animals, but the idea that they'll help the people who bring in these like berserk animals is also kind of nice, right? It's when they feel like they're helping. Bank employees. Sometimes I hear a boo. I don't know, okay, you're too nice for that. But bank employees, we need them, right? And when they have greater meaningful work, they were more altruistic during the COVID pandemic. I believe that studies from Indonesia. Meta-analysis indicates higher organizational citizenship behaviors are an outcome of meaningful work, right? So if you live in a workplace and someone steals your yogurt, that's not organizational citizenship behavior. If you put the paper back in the printer after it's run out, that is organizational citizenship behavior. And that fosters a sense of meaningful work, and meaningful work drives these things, so we like working at those places better. Beneficence and autonomy, longitudinally predicted meaningful work. That's nice, right? So we know that if we encourage people to help, maybe meaningful work follows. We know if we encourage meaningful work, maybe helping follows. So that's sort of a personal level, but what can we go bigger than that? So again, we see more research on bankers. This is from a dissertation by Teresa Carlador. Bankers at credit union with a social mission. Right, so credit unions, I don't know how they're organized elsewhere, but they're usually collectives of people who share some kind of background, whether through employment or residence. They pool their resources, they get benefits of joining the credit union. They had higher meaningful work than bankers at a more commercial mission-focused bank. So just working in a place that was organized to help communities feel more self-sufficient and distribute resources where they're needed was associated with more meaningful work. That's good. Awareness of corporate social programs were linked to a higher sense of task significance. This is one of the building blocks from Hackman and Oldham's model, the job characteristics model, about where meaningful work might develop. Fairness and responsible leadership predicted most dimensions of the comprehensive work scale, Mario Lips-Wiersma's amazing work. So we go on and on, right? So communication about shared goals and labor helped support meaningful work among conservation workers in Brazil. They're up against a lot, conservation workers in Brazil. Last year was the most acreage or hectares of rainforest burning and clearing in the history of South America and the Amazon forest. And there are people out there trying to stop it, and some of them get killed. So being able to find meaningful work in the face of all that is hard to do, but they can do it. Discernible ecological and sustainability practices, not just like, hi, I'm from Shell Royal Dutch and we love the planet, but actual things where they're doing something to try to reduce the impact of our living activities on the planet. Those foster meaningful work. And finally, again, trying to support conservation workers. The job demands and resources model, like Willem Schauffele's work, when people feel like they've got the resources for the demands they're put under, they are able to find meaningful work, including motivations to benefit a greater good. So I think there's some hope here, and we maybe can start to think, wow, life feels terrible sometimes. I mean, it's glorious other times. It's this blend. We don't want to dwell only on the negative. We want to notice and be mindful and aware and savor the positive. But, sometimes it doesn't feel active enough meaning in life. So we can get there from meaningful work, and we can find this harmony. So the next slide is a bit of a nightmare. But this is, in a sense, trying to pull together some of the theories that exist. There's many others that are, you can see I tried to add one word from Roy Baumeister from 1991, just to have some representation of how we've thought about meaning in life over the years. What are the components? What's in there? What's in this mystery stew that we've created when we've talked about meaning in life? So we've got creating, building relationships, enduring suffering from what feels like an eternal wellspring of hope in the face of suffering and hopelessness, Viktor Frankl. It'd be pretty awesome if he was here now to help us figure out what to do. And we've got some of the recent 3 or 4 dimension models of meaning that have come out, trying to unpack. I think of these things as when you ask someone whether life is meaningful, what kind of judgments do they make? What sources of information did they consult before they arrive at the number they give you on the scale, right? So we seem to see these patterns over and over. Coherence, can I make sense of this? Purpose, what am I working towards? Am I doing something worthwhile? Am I striving for something? Significance, is my life worth anything at all? In mattering, do I make a difference? And then Roy Baumeister had 3 other needs for meaning that are along the side that sort of connect as well. And then we've got meaningful work theories, right? So people are working a lot of these, and it's pretty exciting. So there's measurements for a lot of this stuff. There's measurements for the top 3 meaningful work, meaning in life dimensions here. You've seen Frank Martela's name come up a couple times in Beneficence, but he's also part of the small but feisty team that created the 3-dimensional meaning in life scale, but also we have Logan George and Crystal Park, who developed the multi-dimensional existential meaning scale, or existential mattering scale. And over on this side, as I was preparing this talk, just out a measure of Mike Pratt's ideas around how we craft meaningful work through kinship, doing our work well, and helping others. So we're seeing a lot of progress. There's many scales actually now for meaningful work. This one happens to be multidimensional. And in the middle there, then, we have some targets, something we can think about. Why don't we try to make these things happen in life? You might do a different content analysis of what's there. My thoughts were that self-knowledge, authenticity, effective action, self-transcendence and connection. Self-transcendence, right? We have to get out of ourselves. Wisdom, ethics, and an overarching sense of purpose and mission might be what's there. So maybe we ask ourselves, when it comes to meaning, can we think through, are we fostering these characteristics? If we are, maybe we're at least playing in the playground of meaning, and we can consider how to link it to other meaningful endeavors. I don't know if this is the best way to find out if this is what the world is looking for, but these are the top 10 Google searches of 2021. I think it's cricket. I don't really know. Is cricket, does anyone know what IPL is? It is cricket? Yes. Well, it's dominating the world searches for everything. And then DMX, who's a rapper who died. I don't know how that, I mean, it's better be remembered eventually, I suppose. But yeah, so this is what we're after, and I think our robot overlords are pretty happy about this. That what we're looking for and engaging with in life doesn't seem to be what we actually need to have good lives. So what are we here for? We're here for work, right? I mean, we can go lots of places for work. We're here for beautiful people, wonderful inspiration, immense knowledge, practical, can-do. But this is our work to some degree, so this is what we're doing. What are we doing with that work? And it might be a good thing that we are here for work, right? Because there's some evidence that when we search for meaning in life, we feel that aching in our guts or that haunting howl of what is this all for? That we might be able to answer that question through our work. My colleague, Brian Dick, is out here in the audience somewhere, and this is just a correlational study. Let's not get too excited, right? But maybe work is a place where we answer the question, what is my life's meaning? And if so, you're doing that right now, and good, because it seems to lead, or it's related to higher life satisfaction. This is your classic, Barron and Kenny moderator model, right? So that's what we're doing here. So people who are generally searching for meaning in life in the American context look kind of miserable, because we're supposed to be confident about everything. You maybe don't get that sense from Americans that we like to act like we've got it all figured out, just listen to us, we're here in charge. But that culturally comes to us. We're not supposed to be confused about what life's all about. But if we at least say that our work is meaningful, it absolves us a little bit of that pressure and we can move on. And I think this gets to the heart of why we're here today. I don't know if this is what you feel, but I think this is the underlying assumption of our organizations and our work, that flourishing people, which we're focusing on building, well-being, however you want to call it, the 5 dimensions of PERMA, the 4 pillars of well-being from Dr. Davidson's talk, the 6 dimensions of the amazing Carol Riff's psychological well-being scale, whatever it is. We want to build flourishing, and then flourishing people will do good things, right? I think we've heard that from multiple talks. And then the good things will build the better world. And I have to be careful what I actually talk about now that I've stuck things in my talk, but I was inspired after the opening ceremony to fiddle around. Where are we going to look for happiness and inspiration other than the Deaners? There are other choices, of course, but 1996 paper, most people are happy. And they're looking at all sorts of different metrics in a few different places. They estimated that at least 63 to 98% of samples were happy. The most recent data they covered was 1992. I think we can all agree in the last 30 years, things have gone nowhere but up. We've solved all the problems by helping flourishing occur. But what if? What if flourishing people don't do enough good works? What if I don't do enough good works? I'm not a perky fellow, but I do think my life is meaningful, and I think I try to be good. Probably not good enough. What if we don't contribute enough to a better world? And I was a little haunted by a notion from a talk I saw yesterday from Poland. I meant to bring with me my phone and have it ready to save. I know you're there, I think, right? And this work showing that well-being does not always link to increased pro-social intentions. Sometimes it leads to less pro-social intentions unless we have trust. What if, in our effort to reach out and say, your life can be better, you can be happy, you can find peace and harmony, you can have a meaningful life, we're helping put the spotlight on me, me, me. What if? Wouldn't that suck? That when we're at a time when we need to be leaning on each other, gathering each other in, sacrificing now a little bit before we have to give up everything in my worst nightmares. We're helping people feel like, I want to be happy. Am I happy? What can I do to be happy? I'm happy. Now what do I do? Not really sure. Maybe I should get a different flavor of happiness now. I heard about this new one. It's called meaning. Let's get some of that. So, go back to the question, what world are we creating? And the blitzkrieg of dourness is almost at an end. I've got a mini solution for us, I think. What world are we creating? Can you answer that question to yourself, to us? I don't know if I am. Can I do enough to actually create? I mean, that's absurd. Can I create a better world? No, I can create a worse world, right? It's pretty easy for one person to create a worse world, very hard for one person to create a better world. So obviously when it's just me, the answer to this is like, the world is 100% indifferent to my existence so far. And it won't care when Mad Max comes rolling in with his shotguns and his flames shooting out of the electric guitar. So what world are we creating? So this is my proposal. It's sort of a mockery of the idea, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. I think in my career, I mean, it's not been that great, let's be honest, but there's something out there, and I think maybe 1 or 2% of what I've done has any kind of relevance at all to preserving or building a better future. I don't have data. Do we have enough data? Just think about how commonplace it is now that the pioneers have gone to the hard work of saying, yes, happiness is good. Throw it in your global population surveillance measure. Consider it when you're trying to understand public health. Consider it when you're trying to understand alternatives to GDP. Have happiness in there, some version of it. Life satisfaction, autonomy, competence, connectedness, relatedness, meaning in a lot of cases. What does that do now that we're flooded by data? Little data points on this. I guess I'd ask you to consider whether you can have something in your work. Can I have something in my work that at least puts a data point out there every time I do something, so that all of our work does provide little points of light, and not just light to my well-being or my meaning, but when I do research, when I give a workshop, when I give a talk, when you do research, when you inspire companies with your reach, your networks, your caring hearts, your brilliant minds, someone who cares and wants to make a difference more than I can or we can, will have something to take to the stakeholders. We'll be able to put something up in the faces of people making decisions and say, look, but here, what if we did things just a little bit different? We could get people to feel empowered to make change, to save this world. I feel like that would be kind of amazing, right? And it wouldn't be that hard, right? I don't hate. Maybe I do. I don't know. I'm not that great of a guy, right? But I sometimes don't like talks where like, everything that you're doing is wrong, just do it like me. I don't do this, so this is my own remedy, but what if we did that? Just imagine if the world started to fill up with data that was about you in your work, gathering stories, gathering testimonials, gathering data on how what you do links to getting a little bit further away from that terrifying future that most of us in the room have some worry over. that's all I would ask. Maybe that's a little step that all of us can do that builds something that can't be ignored eventually, just like well-being can't be ignored. And more robots. Thank you.